The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus pushed his cleaning cart down the marble hallway of the Meridian Tower. At 42, his hands bore the calluses of honest work, though they had once turned pages of ancient texts and graded doctoral dissertations. The building stood empty at this hour, save for the security guard who barely acknowledged his nightly routine. His phone buzzed with a text from his babysitter. "Sarah is asleep. Math homework done. She asked about you 3 times." The message brought both comfort and a familiar ache. His 80-year-old daughter deserved so much more than their cramped apartment and second-hand everything, but this job, combined with his weekend construction work, barely kept them afloat. Marcus paused at the executive floor, remembering when he had walked similar halls as Dr. Marcus Thompson, professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Georgetown. That life felt like someone else's dream now. He squeezed out his mop and began cleaning, the rhythmic motion soothing his tired mind. The Arabic poetry he once taught still whispered in his thoughts, beautiful verses that no one here would ever know he understood. "Where in the world are you watching from tonight? What time is it where you are as this story unfolds?" The elevator chimed softly as Marcus descended to the lobby for fresh supplies. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled like scattered diamonds against the midnight sky. He remembered bringing Sarah here once during the day, her nose pressed against the glass as she counted the floors of distant buildings. She had asked why Daddy worked when everyone else was sleeping, and he had simply said someone needed to keep the world clean for tomorrow. His reflection caught in the polished surface of the elevator doors. The man staring back wore the same Navy uniform as a dozen other janitors, but behind his tired eyes lived the memory of standing before lecture halls, explaining the intricate beauty of Arabic calligraphy to eager graduate students. He had published papers on linguistic preservation, traveled to Damascus and Cairo for research, spoken at conferences across 3 continents. Now his greatest intellectual challenge was mixing cleaning solutions in the right proportions. Yet he found dignity in the work itself, in transforming chaos into order, in leaving spaces better than he found them. It was not so different from teaching, really. Both required patience, attention to detail, and the quiet satisfaction of improvement. The elevator opened to reveal the security desk, where James sat reading a paperback novel. The older man looked up with a friendly nod, one of the few people in the building who treated Marcus like a human being rather than furniture. The black limousine pulled up to the Meridian Tower at 11:30, its sleek form cutting through the night like a predator. Marcus watched from the 20th floor as a figure emerged, expensive suit catching the streetlight. Even from this distance, the man's presence commanded attention, his movements sharp with barely contained impatience. Khalid al-Rashid had flown from Dubai for this meeting, his oil empire worth more than most small nations. He strode through the lobby with the confidence of someone accustomed to having doors opened and paths cleared. James straightened at the security desk, suddenly formal in the presence of such obvious wealth and power. Marcus returned to his cleaning, but something about the late-night arrival intrigued him. Business meetings at midnight usually meant either desperation or opportunity, and both could be dangerous. He had seen enough corporate drama during his years in academia to recognize the signs of a deal under pressure. The elevator carried the billionaire upward while Marcus worked his way down the hall, his mop leaving pristine streaks across the marble. He could hear voices now, tense and urgent, drifting from the executive conference room. The building's acoustic properties carried sound in unexpected ways, a quirk he had noticed during his months of night work. One voice rose above the others, speaking rapid Arabic punctuated by sharp gestures Marcus could see through the frosted glass. The familiar cadence made his heart skip unexpectedly. Marcus moved closer to the conference room, his cleaning cart providing perfect cover. Through the glass, he could see 3 figures around the polished table. Khalid sat at the far end, his dark eyes flashing with frustration as he gestured emphatically. Across from him, Robert Chun, the building's owner, maintained his usual calm demeanor despite the obvious tension. The third man, someone Marcus didn't recognize, shuffled papers nervously as Khalid's voice rose again. The Arabic phrases flowed like angry poetry, each word precisely enunciated despite the emotion behind them. Marcus found himself translating automatically, a habit from his teaching days that he had never quite shaken. The billionaire was complaining about cultural misunderstandings, about promises broken and respect withheld. His frustration wasn't just about money, Marcus realized, but about dignity. The man felt dismissed, reduced to nothing more than a walking checkbook by people who saw only his wealth and not his heritage. Marcus understood that feeling intimately. How many times had people looked at his janitor's uniform and made assumptions about his intelligence, his worth, his story? The parallel struck him unexpectedly, creating an odd kinship with the angry billionaire just meters away. The meeting grew more heated, voices overlapping in English and Arabic. Marcus continued his cleaning, invisible as always, but his trained ear caught every nuance of Khalid's mounting frustration. The explosion came without warning. Khalid's fist struck the conference table with such force that Marcus felt the vibration through the floor. Papers scattered as the billionaire rose to his full height, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. In rapid-fire Arabic, he accused them of treating him like a fool, of assuming his money came without intelligence or honor. Robert Chun raised his hands in a placating gesture, but the damage was done. Khalid had switched entirely to his native language now, his words flowing with the passion of someone finally speaking from the heart. He spoke of his grandfather's teachings, of business built on respect rather than exploitation, of partnerships that honored both parties. Marcus paused in his cleaning, captivated despite himself. The man's eloquence was extraordinary, each phrase crafted with the precision of a poet. This wasn't just anger, it was heartbreak. Khalid felt betrayed by people who saw only his oil wealth and not the centuries of culture and wisdom that shaped his worldview. The other executives exchanged helpless glances, clearly lost in a linguistic storm. Their ignorance only fueled Khalid's frustration further. He gestured toward the city lights visible through the windows, speaking of dreams and dignity in words they couldn't comprehend. Have you ever been underestimated because of assumptions people made about you? This moment was about to change everything for everyone in that room. Khalid pushed back from the table with such force that his chair rolled into the wall. His final words in Arabic carried the weight of finality, a declaration that some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. He straightened his tie with sharp, precise movements, each gesture radiating wounded pride and dismissed dignity. Robert Chun tried once more to salvage the situation, his voice urgent but useless against the language barrier. The unknown executive shuffled his papers helplessly, clearly out of his depth in this cultural storm. They had lost a $100 million deal through sheer ignorance and assumption. Khalid moved toward the door with the controlled fury of a man who had endured one insult too many. His expensive shoes clicked against the marble with military precision, each step carrying him further from a partnership that could have transformed both their companies. The sound echoed through the hallway where Marcus stood frozen, mop in hand. The billionaire paused at the conference room doorway, delivering one final statement in Arabic that needed no translation. The tone alone conveyed everything: disappointment, anger, and the irreversible decision to walk away. His dark eyes swept the room one last time, seeing only the faces of people who had never bothered to understand him. Marcus watched through the glass as Khalid turned toward the elevator, his jaw set with determination. In 30 seconds, the man would be gone forever. Marcus made his decision in the space between heartbeats. He abandoned his mop and stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tense silence with words that belonged to another life. In perfect classical Arabic, he addressed Khalid directly, his pronunciation carrying the careful precision of academic training. "Your honor and wisdom deserve better than this ignorance," he said, the ancient language flowing from his lips like water from a spring. The words hung in the air, impossible and undeniable. Khalid froze mid-stride, his hand reaching for the elevator button. Slowly, incrementally, He turned back toward the voice that had spoken his language with such unexpected fluency. His dark eyes widened as they fell upon the janitor in the Navy uniform, mop bucket forgotten beside cleaning supplies. The executives in the conference room fell silent, sensing something extraordinary without understanding its nature. Robert Chin stepped closer to the glass, his business instincts recognizing a pivotal moment, even if he couldn't comprehend its cause. Marcus continued in Arabic, his voice gaining strength with each word. He spoke of respect between cultures, of partnerships built on understanding rather than assumptions. The language came back to him like muscle memory, each phrase awakening years of study and passion for Middle Eastern culture. Khalid's expression transformed from shock to something approaching wonder. This was impossible, yet undeniably real. Khalid walked toward Marcus with measured steps, his eyes never leaving the janitor's face. In Arabic, he asked the question that burned in his mind. How does a man who cleans floors speak the language of his ancestors with the eloquence of a scholar? Marcus responded with quiet dignity, explaining in flowing Arabic that knowledge lives in the heart regardless of the hands that carry it. He spoke of years spent studying Middle Eastern literature, of doctoral students who had learned to appreciate the beauty of Arabic poetry under his guidance, of research trips to Damascus and Cairo that had shaped his understanding of Islamic culture. The billionaire's expression shifted through layers of emotion, disbelief, recognition, and something approaching awe. He switched to English, his accent thick with wonder. "You are not what you appear to be," he said, his voice carrying new respect. Marcus nodded simply. "Few of us are, sir. We all carry stories that our circumstances might not reveal." Behind them, Robert Chun emerged from the conference room, his business instincts fully alert now. He had witnessed something extraordinary, though he didn't yet understand its implications. The unknown executive followed, clutching his papers like a lifeline, sensing that the entire dynamic had shifted in ways he couldn't comprehend. Khalid extended his hand toward Marcus, a gesture that bridged worlds and shattered assumptions. The cleaning uniform suddenly seemed irrelevant against the magnitude of this unexpected connection. Robert Chun approached slowly, his mind racing to process what he had witnessed. He had owned this building for 15 years, employing dozens of janitors, yet never once had he imagined such depths beneath their uniforms. The man he had passed countless times in hallways possessed knowledge that could transform international business relationships. Khalid turned to address Robert. His entire demeanor changed. "This man," he said, gesturing toward Marcus, "understands what you could not. He speaks not just my language, but the language of respect itself." In Arabic, he continued, explaining that Marcus had conveyed more cultural understanding in 2 minutes than the executives had managed in 2 hours. Marcus stood quietly between them, still holding his mop handle, but somehow transformed. The fluorescent lights that had made him invisible now seemed to illuminate something precious and hidden. He watched Robert's face cycle through surprise, embarrassment, and finally, calculation. The building owner extended his hand to Marcus, his expression sheepish. "I'm Robert Chun," he said formally, as if meeting for the first time. "I believe we've never been properly introduced." "Marcus Thompson," came the reply, his voice steady despite the surreal nature of the moment. "Former professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Georgetown University, currently employed in building maintenance." The title hung in the air like a revelation, reshaping everyone's understanding of the man who had cleaned their offices in invisible silence. The conference room became an unlikely sanctuary as 3 men from different worlds found common ground and shared humanity. Khalid insisted that Marcus join them at the polished table where decisions worth millions were made. The cleaning cart remained forgotten in the hallway, a symbol of assumptions left behind. Robert Chin listened with growing amazement as Marcus explained his journey from Georgetown's prestigious halls to the night shift in corporate America. Personal tragedy had stripped away his academic career when his wife's medical bills consumed their savings, and her death left him a single father with no safety net. Khalid nodded with understanding that transcended cultural boundaries. He spoke of his own father's teachings about dignity in all honest work, about how wisdom could be found in unexpected places. The billionaire's respect for Marcus grew with each shared story, each glimpse into the sacrifice required to provide for a child alone. The business deal that had seemed impossible an hour earlier now took on new possibilities. Khalid needed someone who understood both Western business practices and Middle Eastern cultural nuances. Robert needed to rebuild a partnership that his team's ignorance had nearly destroyed. Marcus found himself in the extraordinary position of being courted by men whose combined wealth could buy small countries. Yet their interest wasn't in his poverty, but in his knowledge, his bridges between worlds that money couldn't cross. If this story has touched your heart so far, let us know where you're listening from tonight. Khalid leaned forward, his dark eyes intense with possibility. I need someone who can help my companies navigate American partnerships without losing our cultural identity, he said. Someone who understands that business is about relationships, not just contracts. Robert nodded emphatically, finally grasping the magnitude of what his team had missed. We've been approaching this all wrong, he admitted. We need cultural consultation, real understanding, not just translation services. Marcus felt the weight of opportunity settling around him like an unfamiliar coat. These men were offering him a chance to use his knowledge again, to bridge the gap between worlds he had studied for decades. The irony wasn't lost on him that his lowest moment had led to this unexpected recognition. The terms they discussed went far beyond anything Marcus had dared imagine. Consulting fees that would end his daughter's worry about secondhand clothes, health insurance that would prevent the medical disasters that had destroyed his previous life, respect that would restore the dignity he had thought lost forever. Yet something deeper moved him than the financial security. Khalid spoke of bringing his son to America for education, of building partnerships that honored both cultures. Marcus saw the chance to teach again, to share the knowledge that had become his hidden treasure. As dawn approached through the conference room windows, three men who had been strangers hours earlier shook hands on a partnership that would change everything. 3 months later, Marcus stood in his new office overlooking the same city that had witnessed his transformation. The view was identical, but everything else had changed. His daughter, Sarah, pressed her face against the glass, just as she had that day months ago. But now she wore a new school uniform and carried books that sparked her curiosity rather than worried about their cost. Khalid's voice drifted from the conference room, where he was explaining Middle Eastern business customs, to Robert's newly educated team. The partnership had flourished beyond anyone's expectations, built on the foundation of genuine cultural understanding that Marcus provided. The cleaning cart still moved through the building's halls each night, but now it was pushed by someone else while Marcus worked to build bridges between worlds. He had learned that wisdom could emerge from the most unexpected places, that dignity lived not in titles, but in the courage to reveal one's true self when the moment demanded it. His phone buzzed with a text from Khalid. My son arrives next month for his American education. Will you help him adjust? Marcus smiled, remembering his own struggles with cultural adaptation. Of course, he typed back in Arabic. Sarah looked up at her father with eyes bright with possibility. Sometimes the most extraordinary transformations begin with a single moment of courage. When someone chooses to step forward and speak their truth, no matter how invisible they might seem. Hit subscribe for more inspiring stories that remind us every person carries hidden treasures waiting to be discovered.